Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side, yeah.
Greetings, Deep Divers. It's Maddie from MadeUpByMaddie.com, bringing you another far-out episode of The Dive. For this week's transformation, my inspiration will be Priscilla Presley on her wedding day to Elvis Presley, and a little cameo by yours truly.
Priscilla Beaulieu tied the knot with the king of rock and roll on May 1st, 1967 at the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada, when she was 21 years old. Wanting the most private and intimate ceremony, only the closest people to the couple were invited, with an attendance total of just 14. The marriage lasted 6 years.
Today we let loose into our deep dive into 1967, the year that brought us the Summer of Love. So many pop culture moments, as well as pivotal moments for the United States and the world. So without further ado,
turn on, tune in, drop out.
and now for the headlines of 1967. On January 16, 1967, America's first Super Bowl took place, with the Green Bay Packers beating the Kansas City Chiefs 35-10. The Monterey International Pop Festival took place on June 16th, 17th, and 18th in Monterey, California. Featuring such memorable acts as Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and Otis Redding, this monumental event is said to have sparked what is referred to as the Summer of Love. On the flip side, the summer of 1967 wasn't without its problems. 1 month later, a riot boiled over onto the streets of Detroit after a police raid on an after-hours club. Although the establishment was guilty of operating illegally, the pushback from the black community was a result of years of systemic racism, oppression, segregation, and overall inequality. The world's first automated teller machine, or ATM, made its debut on June 27, 1967 at Barclays Bank in Enfield, United Kingdom. However, the technology would not debut in America for another 2 years. And on August 30th, 1967, Thurgood Marshall is confirmed as the first African-American Justice of the United States Supreme Court. And now I'll be sharing the 9 albums I listened to during my week in 1967. On Sunday, I kicked off the week with Are You Experienced by Jimi Hendrix. So kicking off the Summer of Love in true psychedelic fashion, this Jimi Hendrix album is just that. An experience that takes you places you may have never been, nor will ever be again. I distinctly remember calling friends after first listening to this album, asking, "Have you heard this album? Have you heard this?" This is one of the few utterly mind-blowing albums on my journey. Hendrix's debut record hits the ground running with sharp guitar bends, rolling and chugging percussion, and Jimmy's signature sexy howl. A perfect album all the way through indeed. My favorites are Purple Haze, Manic Depression, Hey Joe, Foxy Lady, and Are You Experienced? On Monday, I got a little greedy and listened to 2 Beatles albums, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and The Magical Mystery Tour. Alright, so it's no secret that this journey has turned me way on to the Beatles. Like I said, not being able to decide between both releases, I came to the conclusion just to devour both. The Beatles really outdo themselves on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Released only 2 weeks after Are You Experienced, this record is instrumentally lush, very theatrical, and vocally diverse. They even let Ringo sing lead on With a Little Help from My Friends. As a full concept album, this one ranks really high for me in the Beatles catalog. Offering even more psychedelia, Magical Mystery Tour is this hazy opus that really feels like a come down, with delicious moments at every turn, with songs melting into the listener's ear. It doesn't have the deliberate quality as Sgt. Pepper's, but it really doesn't need it. Now, if both of their 1967 releases were, let's say, jars of peanut butter,
Sgt. Pepper's would be crunchy, while Magical Mystery Tour would be its smooth counterpart. My favorites off Sgt. Pepper's are the opening track, With a Little Help from My Friends, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Getting Better, Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, and A Day in the Life. My favorites off Magical Mystery Tour, I Am the Walrus, Hello Goodbye, and Strawberry Fields Forever. On Tuesday, I listened to The Doors by The Doors. A very commercially successful album. The Doors' self-titled album was very bluesy, full of melodic tunes that carry the album all the way through. If 1967 was a turning point in both music and culture, the opening track, Break On Through to the Other Side, was a call to action. Seeing as the album was released only 4 days into the new year, a gigantic billboard hung over Sunset Boulevard advertising the release of this album, which is said to be the first occurrence of this now popular trend in media promotion. My favorites off this are Break On Through to the Other Side, Alabama Song, Light My Fire, and End of the Night. On Wednesday, I listened to Inside Out by The Association. A sunny and bright pop album, this gem brought forth one of the biggest songs of the summer of 1967, a track called Windy. This album was fun to listen to. The voices of the band blend together perfectly. The shining moment for me on this album was a song titled Never My Love, which immediately became one of my favorite songs of all time after listening to it. This reassuring love song meets lullaby is the ultimate ballad. My favorites off this record, Wasn't It a Bit Like Now, Windy, and Never My Love. Thursday brought an album by the Paragons entitled On the Beach with the Paragons. Hailing from Kingston, Jamaica, this early ska group delivers perfection on their first album. Deciding to take a different turn from the rock of 1967, this album was the perfect shift for me. The relaxed tempos and slinky tones make for a very remarkable listening experience. Being a huge Blondie fan, I was really excited and surprised to hear the original version of The Tide is High on this jammin' record. My favorites off this one, On the Beach, The Tide is High, So Much Pain, and Rolling High on a Windy Day. On Friday, I listened to the Velvet Underground and Nico's self-titled debut album. With one of the most famous album jacket covers of all time, it's finally time to listen to the Velvet Underground's very first record. Although I had listened to this a couple of times in my youth, I feel I may have been a little too young to understand the genius behind it, and maybe I shrugged it off. But this album had so many hands on it, hands of so many greats of the time. It's just crazy to think what the process of making it must have looked like. With Andy Warhol on production and the talents of Nico, Lou Reed, and John Cale, the songs sound primal yet hazy. From the music box intro of Sunday Morning to the thumping tempos of Run, 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 this album truly dazzles. My favorites off this record are Sunday Morning, I'm Waiting for the Man, Femme Fatale, and of course Venus in Furs. And on Saturday, I listened to The Mamas and the Papas Deliver by The Mamas and the Papas. The perfect close to the week. This album opens sweetly with the most famous version of Dedicated to the One I Love, shifting to a perfect mix of covers and original compositions. Fun and folky, this album keeps a steady pace at all times. Mama Cass's voice elegantly sways and is probably the best out of the entire band. Now, some songs are stronger than others, but coming in at only 35 minutes, it's a great showcase of the capabilities of this quartet. My favorites are Dedicated to the One I Love, Creek Alley, and Boys and Girls Together. And finally, for my bonus album, I listened to Surrealistic Pillow by Jefferson Airplane. And just when you thought I was finished, I threw in a bonus album, which makes it 9 albums for the week of 1967. I had to give this album a spin, never having listened to anything other than the hits. Now, while I appreciated the feel of the album, it did feel a little long. There are some very strong tracks on this record, without a doubt. I just think it's more of a time and place type of record, and in the right setting and frame of mind, perhaps I'll catch it again. My favorites off this record are Somebody to Love and White Rabbit, which ended up being the hits. Now it's movie time. I kicked off 1967 by watching Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
with Sidney Poitier, and it was a fantastic movie. Dealt with a lot of issues that were really budding up around that time, in 1967. The movie is centered around an interracial couple. It's a black man and a white woman who are in love, who are about to meet each other's parents. So awkwardness ensues. If we're talking about just the culture of young people in 1967, we're talking about those people's parents. At the basis of it all, it's just a love story. It's two people coming from two different backgrounds coming together to not only show each other's parents what is possible, but also the audience. And it's a beautiful movie, but it does touch on some serious content, and I'm really glad that I watched it. I've always heard about it, and it was an instant classic for me. Next, I watched Bonnie and Clyde, starring Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty. And this was an explosive tale about a couple on the run, committing crime, being in love. It's kind of like that outcast love story from before in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, but this one is with crime. And it's very unconventional, but it's based on the true story of Bonnie and Clyde. At only an hour and 51 minutes, the movie packs in the perfect amount of action, great dialogue, great acting. I mean, Warren Beatty, Faye Dunaway, those two are powerhouses in their own right, and coming together, they make a fantastic film. I enjoyed it. It did drag on just a little bit for me. Again, I need something to capture my attention just a little bit more. Yes, it had action. Yes, it had great dialogue, but it just wasn't my favorite of 1967, although it was not a bad movie, and I still would recommend it. All right, so The Graduate. This movie I've heard about for years. I mean, I'm just gonna say it. It's not really spoiling the movie. It happens in the first 5 minutes. Dustin Hoffman sleeps with an older woman. It's the wife of a family friend. And it's just a hilarious, awkward coming-of-age story. The soundtrack is heavily backed by Simon and Garfunkel. Mrs. Robinson. It clicked for me because her name is Mrs. Robinson. The song is Mrs. Robinson. Okay, I get it. I understand. This was a fantastic movie. I could not recommend this one enough. Also keeping me on the edge of my seat with tension. It's very awkward. It's very sad. Dustin Hoffman plays the tragedy of his character so well. And as a member of the audience, you really feel for him. All right, and finally, for my scary movie of the year, it's gonna be Wait Until Dark with Audrey Hepburn. This movie is pretty messed up. I don't want to give away the movie too much, but if you like a good vindication story, if you like that art, go for this movie and you will not be disappointed. It's definitely a slow burn. It takes a while to jump off to the races, but it pays off in the last act of the movie. So definitely watch this one. This one's great.
It's time for the big splash.
All right, so my Big Splash Award for music, surprise, surprise, was very tough. The first album I listened to was Are You Experienced by Jimi Hendrix. I don't know why it took me so long to listen to this album, but setting this in the beginning of the week made everything else it did not measure up to what I was listening to. I've always had respect for Jimi Hendrix, but I've never listened to his full album. This album is mind-blowing. I still find myself going back to this album whenever I'm through with whatever year I'm on. This has made such an impact on me that it definitely wins as the biggest splash in music for 1967, hands down, 100%. Every time. The guitar parts, the actual title track, Are You Experienced, the drums being played backwards. It's so good. If you're gonna listen to an album this year, make it Are You Experienced. And my Big Splash recommendation for movies of 1967, it's gonna have to be The Graduate. That movie was so good. It was so uncomfortable, but you feel for the characters, for all the characters. The protagonist, who is Dustin Hoffman, he just gives a stellar performance, and you're not going to be disappointed if you watch The Graduate. It's a classic. Watch it.
It's the look
Alright, so now we're gonna talk about the look, the 1967 marriage of Elvis Presley and Priscilla Presley on May 1st, 1967. Am I excited about this look because I'm in it? No, not exactly. I was really excited about just recreating the picture and having it perfect to detail. That was really important for me. Of course, the makeup had to be perfect as well. Priscilla Presley wears a very thick, very sharply winged eyeliner, a big lash, foundation that is just 1 or 2 shades too light for her. Again, a very matte finish. For the eyeshadow, it's very light, almost a white and a nude color. So I stuck with the nude color more on the lid and then smoked it out with white up into the brow. I definitely went over budget in this one just because I had to buy for 2 people and it took the longest, I think, out of the entire challenge to make sure I had everything right. In the original picture, Elvis is wearing a paisley jacket. It's a black on black paisley jacket, which was very hard to find, but I did. And of course there's the rice, which got everywhere. This was filmed at my house, so I'm still finding pieces of rice in the couch, in the track to the sliding door. This was 2 months ago. Other than that, at the time I was blonde, so I sprayed my hair black. I wasn't really part of the makeup look. I was really just more of an accessory to my friend Paulette, who was the model for this look, and I think she did a great job. I think she nailed the feel of Priscilla. She served up acting. Obviously, the picture matches exactly what we're looking at from Priscilla and Elvis Presley, and I cannot be happier with this look. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. If you want, you can always check out my website, madeupbymaddie.com, where you can see my blog, view my portfolio. My site is available in English and in Spanish, and of course you can contact me or book me, as I am a worldwide makeup artist and I would love to be a part of your world. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again next time.